Hey everybody, I'm back a little bit. I've been gone for quite some time. There's been some renewed interest in my Monoprice Select Mini conversion to use a typical riprap style bed. This one measures 220 by 220. I had some interest in how to do this upgrade kit, and I never really published good instructions. All I did was put the files up on Thingiverse, which was my own fault. I should have included better instructions for that, but had a couple people show some interest in it, and I wanted to explain exactly how this works. So I'm going to be tearing this down and showing how I did this, why I did this, and how it all comes together. And I'm going to apologize in advance. There's going to be some jump cuts and some fast forwards. I have tendonitis right now, and I'm right-handed, so working with tools is a little difficult for me, and that's going to slow me down a little bit. But I'm going to try to explain everything the best I can. And if you're interested in some of my other modifications, there's a whole stack up of everything I've done to this in the description below. If you want to know more about what I've done to this printer, please feel free to ask, and I'll tell you everything I can. But in the meantime, let's get to it. So for starters, I did your somewhat typical bed rewire, just like most people do with this stock machine. As it comes, the bed wires go down through the carriage into the main body underneath here. This causes a lot of stress when they move, and people often get broken heat bed wires because of that. So my wiring system goes out the back here and then in through this rear panel to reduce the stress on those wires. And they are excessively long just to reduce stress. They don't get in the way. There's plenty of slack even when it's at full extension, and it keeps those wires from breaking. So the main part of this kit, actually really the only part of this kit, is on the bed right here. These two rods here on the sides, I'm not sure if you can see those two well. Yeah, these two rods are actually the stock rods that came on the bed from the factory. And then there are two new rods underneath here to support this new bed extension. And I think right about now I'm going to roll in some B-roll of what this model looks like, and you'll be able to see that these files are available on Thingiverse. And I'm going to go over here a little bit how you can print those if you just have a stock Monoprice Select Mini. Obviously these are too big for that bed, but there's a little bit of a workaround. You can get these printed in one solid piece because they will not work if you split them apart. But we're going to go over that here in a minute. First, let's get back to this. I'm going to disassemble this and show you how it all comes together. Okay, and that's the bed disassembled. This area here is still pretty much stock. I'm going to see if I can bring the camera in just a little bit closer, and we'll get a better look at how this all comes together. Okay, I think this might be as good as we're going to get with my rickety setup. I literally have my phone duct taped to a vacuum cleaner because my tripod is missing. It's one of those things that I lost when I moved. But here on the Mini, you have three gears here. This one is actually attached to the stepper motor that drives the bed. These two are loose and allow it to spin. There are two bearings here. I did take my Dremel tool and cut off the top of these bearing housings. They are tall enough that with this bed system installed, they catch and they drag. So I just flattened these on top to right about the same height as the bearing holders, or excuse me, as the bearings themselves. So that is one thing you're going to have to do. But the bed system, they are labeled front and back. This is the back piece, and this is the front piece. And they are side specific because they have different features and different orientations. They are mirror images of each other. And the front piece also has this block here for engaging with the Y limit switch. what they both share in common is where these rods connect. There is a little bit of a wedge shape there. I'm not sure how well you can see that in my lousy camera setup here. There you go. That little wedge shape. And there is an M3 screw and a nut that clamps down on these rods. Now this one is broken here and loose. So I really ought to print another one of these while I'm at it, but I'm not going to do that right now. But these rods are, let me see here. These are 300 millimeter rods, 6 millimeter diameter, 300 millimeter long stainless steel rods. So you can see here there is a nut in place, and this goes to an M3 screw, and this screw is for retaining the Y belt. So this belt hooks on that screw. I have a little loop in the end of this belt, and then it is sandwiched between these two posts here, and it lives just like that. Same arrangement on the back end. It just fits between those two little sandwich posts there, and the screw holds it in place. For your belt length, I cannot give you an exact measurement on that. I have the little loops in the ends and then the overall length of it. What I ended up doing to get this length right, I threaded it all in and had the front section available to me. I measured out how the bed was at full extension. I slid it back and forth, and I just gradually tightened one end of this belt until the whole thing was tight. And then at that point, I looped it around and secured it with a zip tie. So you're gonna have to play with that on your own. I'm sorry, I can't give you an exact measurement because it does depend on what bed you use. Now, moving on to the bed. There are nut holes here on the front and back sections for where your heat bed attaches. I used a 220 by 220 A-net style heat bed. Screws and their lengths are actually important, and I'm missing one already. Here we go. So let me double check here. Yes, all but one of these are the same length. The front left corner is shorter than all the others because it crashes on the bearing holder on the printer, and it is ever so slightly shorter. In fact, it's hard to show you here. It is just ever so slightly shorter, which does limit your ability in leveling your bed. You have to use your Z and stop to get it in the neighborhood, and then you can fine tune it with these. So then when you are leveling your bed, you've got to do it exactly like you do from the factory, using an Allen wrench or a screwdriver to tighten and loosen these screws. The nuts on the ends of those screws are M3 hex nuts that fit right into these little pockets here to prevent them from spinning while you're leveling the bed. If I didn't mention it already, and I'm sure I didn't, all the hardware on this is M3. This is all M3 hardware. I just used a mishmash of screws and nuts that I had on hand. I'm not sure what lengths they are. It's going to take a little playing with to figure it out. So I learned a little too late. I went through like 14 versions of this, that this whole thing flexes. And you can see the point at which it flexes. So I took the stock bed rods from the Mini, and I made this pocket assembly here on the bed adapter, and it fits right in there. And then you can put an M3 screw straight through here to keep it captive, and now it does not flex. So now let's go over a little bit of assembly while I put this all back together. And then we're going to cover how you can print this if all you have is a stock machine. So we've got M3 screw and nut here, M3 screw and nut here to retain the 300mm rods. I've got an M3 nut down here for when we install the belt. And I have the stock bed rod installed here. And then same story on the front end. On the printer itself, obviously, the Mini only has 120 millimeters in any direction from the factory. There we go. So I installed this elongated gantry here, which is now hard to show you since I moved to a close-up. These, I believe, are also 300mm rods, but these are 4mm rods, I believe. Let me grab my calipers real quick. I misspoke earlier, and I'll probably dub this in the edit, but these are 6mm rods. These, for the bed, are 8mm rods. And I cut off this assembly here. I'm not sure what you'd call it, this shroud. I cut that off because the X limit switch still has to live here. I got a new belt, and this coincides with my carbon fiber PLA Hotend carriage to use a E3D V6 style Hotend. That's a whole other story. I'm not going to talk about that today, but longer belt, 300mm. I believe these are 300mm, rough estimate here. No, actually, these are like 120mm. I cut these to length myself. I probably bought 300mm rods and then cut them myself. So you'll have to figure out what works with your Hotend assembly, because this may not be the same size if you're using this stock Hotend carriage. But between 200 and 300mm, 6mm long rods for your Y assembly. And then I remixed a design for a support brace, and I do not have the original design. I stretched it out and printed it, and I did not keep the files. My mistake. But I do recommend doing this, because without this, this will sag under its own weight. So instead, I have this printed adapter here with some bearings and another 6mm steel rod that goes all the way up and holds this in place better than it can on its own weight. For the bed install, we got my back piece, and I'm going to put in my 300mm rods and then tighten the screws that hold that in place. Now I'm going to take my belt, and you can see how that fits on there. Okay. And insert the rods through the bearings on the machine body. Now, for the belt path, I'll try to show you this as best as I can here. For the belt path, this spins freely, this spins freely. This is the one that dictates how your bed spins, okay? It does not go straight between these here with the teeth facing that way. The teeth on your belt are facing to the right of the machine that way. It goes around this pulley, around the drive pulley, and then back around this free pulley. So it goes around that way and then pulls tight. Hope that makes sense. Now, the front portion of the bed. And I'm not going to tighten these just yet. And I'm not going to attach the belt just yet. Because now, what I will do, I'm going to take the heated bed, and without any nuts or springs, just the bed and the screws, I'm going to line this up on the adapter plate. Now, as we can see, my back section is fitted together, but my front section, the screw hole spacing is just a little bit off. So what I'm going to do is budge the assembly forward a little bit until these screw holes line up. Okay, so now that sits more or less squarely on the adapter plate. Okay. Okay. Now I will tighten the screws that hold the rods. Now that's in place. The bed should come off freely. It does. And I can take my belt. And if I were installing this for the first time, I would be pulling it tight, kind of levering it against the screw that's protruding here, and figuring out how long I need this belt to be. I have already fitted it. It's a little looser than it ought to be, but it works well enough. And if I'm going to reprint this adapter sometime in the future, I will probably redo the belt as well. But that's how you install that. So then comes the frustrating process of putting the springs in place and the belt, or excuse me, and the bed in place. But I want to make a quick note. This point right here is why this screw has to be shorter than all the others. Actually, I misspoke. The left side screws are shorter. It's not just that one. Which is why it was so hard for me to show how short they were compared to each other, because the ones on this side are roughly the same. This is a right side screw on top and a left side screw on bottom. So we have 19.7 millimeters, which if you only count the threads is 17.4 millimeters. And only counting the threads, 13.3 millimeters. Your left side screws are going to have to be shorter because they crash right on this bearing holder. I'm going to go ahead and put a long screw through here just to demonstrate. You can kind of see that hanging down there. It hits it, and it does not reach the end of travel. That is the end of travel. Almost all the way past this bearing holder. So when you install this for yourself and you come up with your own screws to use, you're going to have to figure out how long this screw is going to be based on your leveling. Okay, now that's installed. If you've got a different wiring setup than mine just has this convenient little plug, so now I'm going to plug it back in. And now I would go through the process of leveling the bed and getting it ready to print, but I'm not going to do that right now because I don't think I need to teach you how to level your bed. But now we're going to talk about how you can print this if you only have a stock machine. So if you jump on over to Thingiverse, you can search for the cheapest Maximus. And I'm going to have links to this down in the description. The cheapest Maximus is a printed bed extension that you can print on a stock machine, and it will give you the space you need. And he has an excellent write-up of everything you need here. Very well done. This is what you need. If you print one of these and you now have the extended bed, you can see how much more space you get. This glass plate, you can see the edge of here and the edge of here. That's your minimum and maximum now. And this is now big enough that you can print the front and back pieces individually of my bed extension. So you can go from stock to cheapest Maximus to my extension, which does not have a catchy name, or you can just stick with the cheapest Maximus. But I know that there are some people out there who want the 220 by 220 bed extension instead of 120 by about 200 that you get off of this. Hey, me from the editing desk here, which is exactly where I just was, but not recording on my phone this time. Somehow or other, the outro video that I recorded got corrupted. Oops. I'm not really going to record all of that again, but basically that should help you figure out how to install my mini 2 mega print bed extension by way of the cheapest Maximus. It's sort of a two-step process. So hopefully that helps you. Hopefully you understand what I went with here to try and make this work. If you need a different bed, because technically speaking, the one that I bought on Amazon is no longer in stock. You cannot buy that exact one. So if you get a different bed, check your screw hole spacing. I built this thing in Tinkercad. I know it can be done. So if you use Tinkercad or Fusion 360 or whatever, when you get a new bed, measure your screw hole spacing for the front and back pieces. Don't worry about the front to back distance. Worry about your left to right distance on the bed. Double check your screw hole spacing against my model and make any adjustments you may need to, because that's your critical dimension. As I showed with how I tightened the rods and got the screw hole spacing correctly on front to back, that is not really something you need to worry about in CAD, as long as the screw holes match up on the plates relative to your build or your print bed. So edit those as you need to. Obviously, you have to have ones with screw holes that are in the far corners. They can't be inset. So good luck with that. And yeah, leave me a comment if you have any questions. Again, all of the stack up for my other modifications I've done to my printer are in the comments below. If you have any questions about those, feel free to let me know. Hopefully you found this interesting and useful, and I didn't botch it up too much. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helps you get a bigger bed on your Mini and make it even more powerful of a machine than it is from the factory. So take care.